Well, hello there, and I do hope you're all well. Now, I do hope you agree that this is the best ever powerful takedown of our free trade agreements we've negotiated so far. Now, this happened in our Minister of International Trade, Kemi Badenoch's first International Trade Committee meeting, and the chair of the committee, SNP MP Angus Brendan McNeill, was not in a very charitable mood. Might have something to do with the court case of the India referendum, I suppose. What I'll do is I'll say cheerio from here, is because it does go on for over 15 plus minutes. So all I'm just going to say is just sit back and enjoy, my friends, and because it'll be well worth it. And I'll catch you later. So take care.
Thank you. Just in what you've said, I'm just wondering if you've paid much attention to the recent speech from the former DEFRA Secretary of State George Eustice on trade negotiations. Does he have a point in what he said in the comments on that general debate that threw trade negotiations together in what seemed a tick box exercise by government? But anyway, on the thrust of George Osborne's points, and they were
George Eustice.
George Eustice, sorry, indeed. Yes, George
I don't know
Eustice.
anything that George Osborne said. So.
He probably agrees. But I mean, let's be frank, they were scathing about what was going on and what's been happening, and setting up timetables to basically undermine. Your thoughts?
Yes, many. First of all, I would like to put on record that I disagree with George's view, and I think almost all of it. There is one small bit I think I did agree with, which I will come to, but I disagreed with what he said about it not being a good deal for the country. That's absolutely not true. I also strongly disagree with what he said about Crawford. I don't know how the department would have coped without Crawford during this period. I've known him now for 2 months, many others for much longer. He is an invaluable asset to the department, and I think everything that George said about Crawford was wrong, and I would like to put that in particular on record.
That sounds like you might be tempted to make Crawford Faulkner the permanent secretary.
Would you like to become the Secretary Crawford?
I've been delighted to do it on an interim basis, and I'll be even more delighted when somebody's appointed full-time.
Well, there's your answer. There's your answer.
So it's a he, she, that we'll have a new permanent secretary at some point going forward.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, he said that, the TRQs in beef were very liberal, and also for sheep, and that Australia and New Zealand would have settled for much less, but the UK being so keen to have a trade deal basically set a timetable, which, of course, the Trade Secretary asked, that was a number, what he would need in order to conclude an agreement by the time of the G7. And the Australian trade negotiator wisely asked for the kitchen sink, just about, which eventually shaped the deal, said Mr. Eustice. I mean, that's damning.
It is, but I think it is incorrect. When I asked
did she not, sorry, just on that, did the previous Trade Secretary then not ask her opposite number what he would need in order to conclude an agreement by the time of the G7?
So the Trade Secretary did not ask
Did
her...
the then Trade Secretary ask or not ask the Australian opposite number what he would need in order to be able to conclude an agreement by the time of the G7?
That I am not aware of any such question being asked.
Could you find out?
I could find out, but as
because
far as...
that seems crucial. Because
as far as I know, that sounds like a standard negotiating question where we ask, what is it that you want? And the other team asks us the same thing. But in terms of, tell us what you want and we'll give you everything, I think that question is ambiguous in terms of how it is framed.
It's a slightly different thing because it puts a time schedule on this. And when you've put a time schedule on it, you change the dynamics of the negotiation. Because if the other side see that your ask isn't a trade ask, your ask is a timing ask, and they then trade your timing for their trade ask, which is effectively what Mr. Eustice said happened, then they're in the driving seat because you are anxious to get the agreement done by the time of the G7 quote.
So that is, you asked if there was anything in George's comments that I agreed with. I do think deadlines can be incredibly unhelpful in negotiations. We saw this with Brexit. But if the other side knows that you have a deadline, they are able then to hold out or be more difficult, which creates an incentive to create more concessions. As far as I'm aware, there was no conversation like that took place beyond the general realms of what you ask in a negotiation. And I suspect that if that had been the case, George would have been in the room, and if he wasn't, then I think this is probably speculation. He has not told me that, and I think that there is more speculation than anything else.
I'm just taking from his speech in the comments, which you may or may not have seen. He also said that the full liberalisation on beef and lamb access didn't need to be given. It was such a generous offer to Australia. It was so big that neither Australia or New Zealand had anything to return for such a grand concession. And he goes on to say that Australia remains one of the few countries left in the world that maintains an absolute ban for British beef, using the spurious sham, he says, of BSE. So, I mean, they must have thought Christmas was coming when they saw the UK negotiators.
Well, I think it also shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the UK and the Australia-New Zealand economy. The fact is that we are 70% services-based, and there is no outright ban on British beef. What they have done is set standards which are, at the moment, are uneconomic for our farmers to comply with. But I think you would be very shocked if all of a sudden we decided to lower our quality and SPS standards because of a trade deal. So Australia is doing exactly what we would be doing. We got significant barriers in other sectors separate from agriculture. So of course, a DEFRA secretary will be looking at this solely within the realms of what DEFRA is concerned about. As Trade Secretary, I have to be looking across the entire economy, and that means looking at what other sectors are asking for, but also remembering that we are doing trade deals not just for producers, but primarily for consumers.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to tease out the difference between the ancient regime and the current regime. You're telling me that if you were negotiating the Australian and New Zealand trade agreement, nothing really would change. You would do the same thing as regards. You'd give away the whole. You wouldn't ask for a TRQ, just give it away.
We haven't given anything away. A trade agreement.
Obviously, the UK has in the trade agreement. It's in black and white.
But that's not what giving. That's not giving things away. I think people need to stop looking at trade agreements as if it's a zero-sum game. It's not a tit for tat where you pay something and get something else. It is not.
It's not.
No. A trade agreement is far more complex than that. And when you have comprehensive trade agreements, you're looking across multiple sectors. You're looking at a range of issues that are actually going very far into the future. So, for instance, you talked about full liberalisation. That's just wrong. We haven't fully liberalised. It's staged, so there's 15 years.
Yes, and then you fully liberalise.
Well, in 15 years' time, I think that we will, first of all, have given farmers time to adjust if things do look like they're becoming less competitive. Remember, this is all speculation. The deal isn't even in place yet, and we're already talking it down. And one of the things that I found particularly challenging is having my counterparts abroad listen to members across the House, it's not just opposition, members across the House, talk about their countries in such a disparaging way as if we're dealing with authoritarian or despotic regimes. Australia is a country that has high standards. We have a very good relationship with them. They are our allies. They're in Five Eyes. We have the AUKUS deal. This is a country that we need to be working more closely with and not talking about as if it's going to ruin our economy. It simply is not the case.
I think that it's rather grand to say it would ruin the economy. What is...
Or will ruin the economy for farmers, which is something that has been put to me, and it is categorically not true.
And a food security aspect as well. But I think we've established that you'd have negotiated the same deal.
Can I come back to you on food security?
Please,
food security is something which we need to diversify as much as possible. We do not grow all the food that we need in the UK for ourselves.
Do you want to grow more of less of it?
We need to make sure that we are getting it from as many places as possible and reduce the points of failure. One of the problems that we saw with supply chains during COVID was they're getting everything from one particular country, even if it's your own. It means that when things go wrong, they go very, very badly wrong.
So if I don't want to go much further than this, but if the beef production was to go down in the UK, you'd be happy enough because you can get it from Australia.
We already get lots of beef from
I know this, but if it's to go down further, the question isn't where we get it.
I think we should ask consumers what they want. People will always buy British beef, but if what you're saying is that we don't want to buy anything from other countries, then why will they buy our products?
So then just have full liberalisation
we've talked about a staged liberalisation, but again, a free trade agreement cannot be a situation where we want to sell, but we don't want to buy anything. That's just not credible.
So we've established you'd have the same trade deal as in the past. Okay, in the year to June 22 in the Observer last Sunday, UK exports to Japan fell. And why is that? We've got a UK-Japan trade agreement that your predecessor, Liz Truss, said goes significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal.
Yeah.
But at the same period, as you remember, she said goes significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal. In that last year, EU trade with Japan has risen, while UK-Japan trade has fallen. Why?
Well, because, well, for two reasons. One, COVID, and the second one,
COVID is in
unbelievably, is COVID. Yes, but the trade deal was signed in 2020. So first of all, lots of changes took place, as you will know, in terms of what businesses were doing. Businesses that were exporting stopped doing so, but also supply chain issues have had an impact. And it's very easy to say that EU trade with Japan has increased, but the EU is 27 countries. I don't have the figures to hand, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is one particular country or two that are making the differences there. The figures I have seen are showing that actually lots of EU countries have had trade fall as well.
So it's COVID, supply chain issues, and perhaps one country is making up the difference. Is why the EU looks so good.
And also, our free trade agreement was not something that was going to change everything overnight. Again, these are this independent trade policy is one not just for now, but also for the future. So we will see improvements. But I'm not going to say what I'm not going to say is that everything was just because of COVID and so it's fine. It's one of the reasons why we have an export strategy and an export support service, because we recognise that we can't just sit on our laurels and be complacent. If there are things that people are finding making trade difficult, then we are looking to see what we can address them. But there is no reason at all to think that for a free trade agreement to reduce trade. So that's clearly something that is happening at the same time as the free trade agreement, and not because of it. I mean, so correlation is not causation. We should look at what the drivers are, and those are completely separate to the free trade.
I mean, it looks like it didn't go significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal when trade has fallen, does it?
Sorry?
It looks like the UK-Japan trade agreement didn't go significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal when trade has fallen. There's something wrong.
Well, I think that is, again, making an assumption that the cause is the free trade agreement, and I would dispute that. I don't think it's got anything to do with that at all.
Nothing to do with the free trade agreement. So the free trade agreement has nothing to do with UK-Japan trade at the moment, and it's falling. Mr Faulkner, I could turn to you. During the UK-Japan negotiations, which were around at the time, did you ever seek full liberalisation in dairy and cheese products?
We didn't succeed in it, but of course we would have been happy to have negotiated it. But you've got to recall that the basis upon which that negotiation was done was on the basis of the existing agreement that we had with Japan. And so therefore there was no way in which we were going to be in a position
So you didn't ask?
No, of course we always ask, but you have to be able to trade and reach a bigger outcome. We had a very narrow window for that agreement to get through the Japanese diet of about 2 or 3 months after we had left the EU, and we were not in a position to renegotiate parts on our side of the agreement for Japan. So what we got an agreement out of Japan to do was to do as much as we possibly could in that short period of time, and that was to create a world-class digital novelty part to the agreement, which didn't exist anywhere else, and to have a continuity agreement with them to agree to allow us to negotiate into CPTPP. So in other words, it was an arrangement with them, if you like, for a staged further negotiation, which in the CPTPP context we are now in the position of trying to fulfill, which will, if it's successful, lead to improved agricultural access for Japan. So yes, of course, we absolutely sought that in the negotiation, but we didn't get anything that was overly significant out of Japan in those areas, although we did get very specific, country-specific arrangements for the United Kingdom that didn't exist before.
Exactly.
Okay, so I assume from that you didn't seek a larger TRQ for dairy products either with Japan. Why do you think they didn't agree for any of these asks?
Well, it's quite clear that we did seek additionality for dairy products, and as I say, we're currently continuing a negotiation with Japan precisely on that, where we are seeking further additionality on it. The reason we didn't is because they have one of the most didn't achieve it is because they have one of the most protectionist dairy industries in the world. But that doesn't mean to say that we won't still try to, in our negotiations, to secure improvements in access for that.
I mean, did you ever ask Australia then for an enduring TRQ on beef and lamb, given that the TRQ area went badly with Japan? Did you try and employ the Japanese tactics when you went to speak to Australia? Was it on part of your original mandate?
I didn't quite get the
Was it a part
question.
of your original mandate? Did you seek an enduring TRQ with Australia for beef or lamb? Was it part of your original mandate?
Well, we wouldn't have sought an enduring TRQ for beef. Well, for beef with Japan, yes, we would.
No, sorry, this is Australia now.
No, we wouldn't have sought an enduring TRQ for beef with Australia, because Australia already has an open market for beef. The situation with Australia is not a question of a restrictive TRQ, it's because they have what they consider to be a sanitary and phytosanitary regime in place, which ensures that for health and safety reasons they do not consider that imports for the UK are appropriate. So it's not a market access barrier for negotiation. It's something which we would be able to contest, and DEFRA would be able to contest if they chose to do so as a government on SPS grounds. But there was no pressure for us to do so. But it wouldn't have been a part of the negotiation. You would not, in negotiating terms, seek to pay for something that you would consider you're entitled to have because if you thought the Australian measure was illegitimate.
Wasn't enduring TRQ on beef or lamb part of the original mandate? At all?
No, you would not have.
You walk in with the intention of full liberalisation after 15 years?
Absolutely not, because
sorry, hold on, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Which one was it? Did you have a mandate for an enduring TRQ on beef or lamb, or did you walk in there with the intention of giving it all away in 15 years?
No, I can try and be a bit clearer if I wasn't clear enough. I'll say it again. We would not have gone for an enduring TRQ because, in actual fact, we would have the right to access to the market. So you're not going to pay for something which you've already got.
No, but I'm asking what was on your original mandate. Was it? There was no enduring TRQ in the mandate to start with.
You know, you would have the commitment that you would have access to the Australian market, which we do without tariffs.
Yeah, but what was on your mandate?
And that was the mandate. But you know,
sorry, what was the mandate?
The mandate was to secure liberalisation of the Australian tariffs across the board to the extent we could in the negotiation, but you wouldn't have had a TRQ because a TRQ is actually a restriction. It would have been less than full liberalisation.
I'm not asking as an offensive interest. I'm asking as a defensive interest. On your mandate, did you have an ask for an enduring TRQ or not?
I'm not commenting. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on what the government chose to do at stages in the negotiation on the defensive side, but I can certainly say in general terms the mandate that we had throughout the negotiation was a mandate that was agreed by the government at all steps of the way by the normal ministerial processes, and like any mandate during the course of a negotiation, ministers make decisions as to whether they want to modify it, alter it, make it more demanding, make it less demanding.
Okay, so to those watching, that's an evasive answer because you've been asked, did you have an enduring mandate for TRQ and beef or lamb originally or not? You said you can't say. Are you saying, I mean, people need to scrutinise, people need to understand what was going on. Sure. Either do you know if you had a mandate, or are you refusing to divulge that you had a mandate that might have said you needed an enduring TRQ?
I'm saying that as an official, I mean, it's a matter for ministers to maintain their decisions about what they're going to reveal in public about a live negotiation.
Is Australia a live negotiation? Australia is not now a live negotiation.
No, but I'm saying it's not.
So I'm asking you about Australia. Did you have a mandate or not? And what did the mandate say about a TRQ? Yes or no? Was there an ask for a TRQ, an enduring TRQ? Or was the mandate? I'm asking this witness. Was there an ask for an enduring TRQ or not on the mandate?
Well, what I can say to you is in the course of the negotiations, there were periods of time during the negotiations where, of course, the United Kingdom said we wish to have TRQs and no more than limited TRQs for Australia. It was a negotiation. And for quite some considerable periods of time, we were on a position on having TRQs of certain sizes in the lifetime of that negotiation. But like any negotiation, it moves during the lifetime.
Lord Rosenberg, you want to come in at this stage and I'll come back to these points.